Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoy video. This is Jonas here and we're continuing our Lumineth content with our first unit guide for AOS 4. By now you've probably seen all the great videos that we've been putting out for AOS 4. Ryan has just finished up a series on a completely different army, so definitely go check that out. If you're not a Lumineth player and you want to see more IDK content, for example, for the Ydrilan, go check that out. But today we're also posting something new for the Lumineth because, you know, originally it was a Lumineth channel. I'm playtesting the hell out of them, so I've got a lot to talk about. And we're starting with probably my favorite unit from the current Lumineth index, and that's the Ydrilan Riverblades. You can see here below, I actually rate this unit quite highly. Is this the best Lumineth Realm-Lords unit right now in the index? Possibly. Let's take a look why that might be. So for this video specifically, if you've seen any of our previous unit guides from AOS 3, you kind of know the gist of this. So we're going to look at the Warscroll as a whole. Then we'll take a look at what that Warscroll would do in an army, what role it would fulfill. Then we'll look at some strategies. I used to call this basic tactics, but it looked too much like battle tactics after a while. So I swapped it over to strategies now that grand strategies are gone. And then I've got some tips and tricks for you after playing a couple of games with these guys and, you know, tier crafting the heck out of them as well. Let's take a look at their Warscroll first. In our Warscroll breakdown, it was very early days. It still is in a way, but we couldn't really rate this unit properly because the possibilities of this unit only show themselves after you've playtested them a whole bunch. And I've done just that in a couple of games now, and wow, they are really the stars of my games usually. So the Ydrilan Riverblades at the time of recording cost 140. I expect this point cost to go up at some point unless they actually tackle the Warscroll itself. It has the weaknesses, but it does a little bit too much, I think, for 140. I think 160 is probably more fitting. They can actually join the regiment of almost all of our heroes. You know, all Scenario heroes can take them. The Storm Mage can bring them. The Wind Mage can bring them. And then all of our, all the usual stuff like Teclis, Alani, and Elithor in the Lord Regents. So you're kind of hard-pressed to find a unit, or a hero, that cannot bring this unit. That would be Lyrior and the Bannerblade, I think. But apart from those guys, you can bring them anywhere. Now, keep in mind, these guys are 0 to 1 per regiment. That means you can only bring up to 1 unit of these per regiment. So you would actually have to stack up on multiple regiments if you wanted to bring multiple Ydrilan Riverblades. From a financial point of view, I would probably not advise buying too many of these guys because, you know, it's a Warcry warband. They might rotate out. But I'll get into that later a little bit. But let's take a look at the Warscroll itself. First of all, I'm quickly going to talk about the cost, the way that they're taken in a regiment, and their keywords. So as I mentioned before, they're very easy to include in any regiment. So you could bring them in almost all of your builds. At least 1 unit should definitely fit in your builds. I can't imagine you not bringing any of these heroes that I've just summed up. 140 is pretty much equal to most of our other infantry options. Wardens and Blade Lords cost the exact same amount at the time of recording. Sentinels are a little bit more expensive, but are also in the realm of that 140, 150 bracket. And interestingly enough, so far, their keywords have no interaction at all with our index. They have the Ydrilan keyword, so that's the River Temple. It's a temple like the Elrith Temple or the Huracan Temple. But so far, there's no facet of war. There's no heroes that interact with these guys, which is actually a good thing, but we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, let's zoom in on parts of the Warscrolls and tackle them separately. So let's first take a look at their stat wheel and their weapons. So they move 7 inches, which is already 1 inch more than our regular infantry, but they are on a 5-up save, like Sentinels. But if you compare them to Wardens and Blade Lords, for example, they do have a 4-up save. So that's a little bit worse for the Ydrilan Riverblades here. Health and control are exactly the same as you would expect from our infantry. So we can move on to the weapons. And the weapons, you know, at first glance might not look amazing if you're not drilled into the 4th edition mindset yet, but it's actually quite impressive. If you look at the Ythara dart, so their ranged weapon, if you ignore that that 0 rend, that nil rend, that's actually the exact same profile that the Sentinels have, you know, minus the 8 inches, obviously, but the effectiveness of it is actually pretty good for a unit of 10. Keep in mind that the champion, I did not calculate in these stats here below the Warscroll charts. So you would actually add another attack to this profile. So I also only calculated for the 20 attacks, not 21 attacks. But you can see against a 4-up save, for example, they would do 3.33 damage, which is not impressive, but fine if you think about what you want them to do in a battle. But we'll get to that in a sec. Their melee weapons are a little bit better. A unit of 10 actually does 31 attacks, you guys. That is pretty impressive. And their damage is also pretty good, as you can see here, against a 4-up save. They almost do 7 wounds on average, and against a hero, they would do 8 wounds on average. You know, not a lot of heroes on our 4-up save, and they might actually get auto defensed as well. So there is this thing that we have to keep in mind, like how useful is this damage actually? Because maybe now you're thinking, well, that's not all that impressive, Jonas, but well, it actually is in some ways. If we look at what we want this unit to do, we want them to do 2 things. We want them to move around the board, which is what their abilities will do for us. We'll get into that in a second. And we want them to possibly do some damage, and if we can, take out a small hero. Now, taking out a small hero is actually pretty doable. If you combine, let's say, their damage from a 3-up save here, so 2 damage, against a 3-up save, which would be, you know, on average for a hero, with their 6 damage in melee from on average versus a hero, you actually get around 8 to 9 wounds on average, and that would take out almost all small heroes. Well, that would take out all small heroes unless they have a ward save. Even against Stormcast heroes, who are usually on 6 health and have a 2-up save with auto defense, you would still on average inflict 6 damage with the ranged weapons and the melee weapons versus a hero combined. So, you know, these units actually have a pretty good chance of taking out your small heroes, or the enemy heroes at least. Their range damage and melee weapons don't seem impressive in and of themselves, but they have quite a lot of attacks, you know, so that means they're actually pretty good against all things, because they could spike. There's a lot of chances to roll much higher. You're not dependent on 4 high value attacks like with Elethor and Alania, for example, where you could just miss half your attacks and you're losing out on 10 damage. So I kind of like this death by 1,000 cuts kind of war scroll, and their damage actually outclasses all of our other similar foot units, so infantry units. They actually do better without buffs. I gotta be clear about that. A unit of 10 Riverblades does better than 10 Wardens without buffs, and does better than 10 Blade Lords without buffs. Now keep in mind, both the Wardens and the Blade Lords can be buffed, and both of them can also be reinforced, while the Riverblades cannot be reinforced. So that's something to keep in mind. You can't go running around with 20 Riverblades and dealing, attacking with 61 attacks. But it's still important to keep in mind that their damage actually doesn't do worse than our other units, which is interesting. Now, while their damage is actually pretty impressive, I actually love them mostly for their abilities. You can see the abilities here in the top right corner. So their first ability is, I think, the ability that we will see for the Ydrilan Temple at some point. So that will probably become a facet of war. So in any combat phase, that's both your opponent's and yours, this unit can move 2d6 inches. Now you roll this before there's any fighting, because it's a fighting phase ability, but combat phase ability. But you haven't fought yet because it's not a fight ability. And you roll 2d6. You generate your distance. On average that's gonna be a 7, and then you can make that move, but that move must end in combat. Keep in mind, if you cannot end in combat with that move, you cannot make that move. So that's important to keep in mind here. You can, however, pass through models. So it's almost a little bit like fly, which makes it much easier to end that move in combat. And Relentless as the driving current can be used in a lot of different ways. Let's think about that for a sec. So it can happen in any combat phase, which is amazing, both yours and your opponents. And it has multiple uses, as I just said. For example, you failed your charge roll with these guys. This is basically a free charge. You could do it again as a free charge. Now, that's probably a thing that you've all thought about, but you can also use this while you're already in combat. And that gets much more juicy, obviously. So you can use this to jump over units to different enemy units that are hard to reach. For example, if they're hiding a small hero behind a small screen, you jump over that screen and you attack that small hero. That's a thing that you could do, especially with the 3 inches on your melee attacks now that all units get. It's much easier to target those squishy targets. You could also use this to, let's say, you swap from a terrain to an enemy unit. You charge a terrain piece or an endless spell, for example, and then you use Relentless as a driving current to move another 2d6 inches to an enemy unit. So basically, if you get that chain reaction off, you're actually moving 46 inches in your charging phase and your fight phase combined, which is quite impressive. There's also a very small chance that you could use it as a effective screening method. I find it's much easier to explain with a graph, and I've made one for you in the strategy section. So keep this, locked away for a little while until we reach that point of the PowerPoint here. Now, their other ability is Travel the Waterways. This is actually also quite juicy. If you've seen any of our Sylvaneth videos, I love a good teleport unit like the tree revs. It's, you bring that unit specifically for the teleport, and they're of the same price tag, sort of. Now, Travel the Waterways is a little bit worse than a generic teleport to anywhere on the battlefield, because you have to set that unit up wholly within 6 inches of a battlefield edge. So it's either the short edges or your long edge or your opponent's long edge. Could obviously also be your opponent's short edge if the mission is played that way. Couple of things to keep in mind here for Travel the Waterways. So obviously you teleport to a table edge, as I just said. It's a core ability, which means a unit can only do one core ability per phase. So this would disallow other core abilities. Now, the other core abilities that we have so far, like move and run and redeploy, are things that you could not do anyway after a teleport. You cannot move, you could not run, you could redeploy, I guess, but redeploying in your own movement phase is impossible. So I think the core keyword is here more for possible additions to the game or possible other interactions with the game later on. Now, why is this ability amazing? Well, it is quite reliable. There's no roll required. A lot of armies need a roll to teleport around. Even Ydrilan, which is probably the most popular teleporting army, Sylvaneth players, actually need a lot of spell casting to do that. They obviously have their battle formation, but still a lot of resources spent on that battle formation. Sylvaneth need their trees to be at the right place. We just need a table edge, and we'll always have a table edge. So that's pretty cool. I love this the most because our unit's actually quite squishy, so you can actually also teleport them out of combat and then use them to score a couple of battle tactics, even when your units has been greatly reduced to almost 3 or 2 models even. So pretty potent abilities. I really, really love this unit. The options to use this ability to its biggest extent are endless. The options are endless right now. I think there is so much more to learn with this unit, but I'm trying to give you guys the biggest picture I can give now, so you can get playing with these units straight away before they get nerfed or adjusted a bit, because I do feel like an adjustment might be in place here, in the right place. Now, what role do they fulfill in our army? Well, they can do 3 things for you. They will probably do the first thing the best, then the second thing, and then screening as a third thing is something that I'm Not too keen about it myself most of the time, but it can happen, and I just wanted to show you guys how you would do that. So the obvious thing is battle tactics. I keep going on and on about battle tactics and teleporting and fast units and how you need them. But yeah, that's how you win games, guys. So here we are again with chatting about battle tactics. So obviously, these guys are the best at completing battle tactics that require movement. Take the flanks is very easy to do if you set them up in your deployment phase well, and then you can teleport away to do take their land in a following turn. But Reclaim the Realms is also allowed with the teleport, and that would also work perfectly fine. So take their land and Reclaim the Realms you can actually do with the teleport straight away. Take the flanks takes a little bit more practice and planning, but I have an example of that in our graph in the following segment here. They can also complete combat-oriented battle tactics like Slay the Entourage and Slay the Tyrant. Slay the Tyrant is a hero hunting battle tactic, and they are obviously best against heroes, so they're actually quite good at doing that for you as well. Do keep in mind though, on average, their damage is just good enough to kill a small hero, so you've not got redundancy there. So on a bad roll, that's not going to work out for you. Whereas with the movement ones, there's usually little interaction that your opponent can do, to block you from completing those. Reclaim the Realms and Take Their Land could still work, I guess. They get to do a redeploy to close you in and block your battle tag, but that's something that you have to keep in mind for all of your units anyway. The other attacks are also pretty doable. Thanks to their flexible movement, they can actually do anything. I played another game just yesterday with these guys, and they completed 3 of my 5 battle tactics for me by themselves almost. So pretty cool there. I would not advise using them for Do Not Waver because no unit can be slain, and they're only 10 health total on a 5-up save. So no minuses to hit because they're not Venari, and no ward save either. So be very careful with using these guys for Do Not Waver. You could also use them for damage. You've seen the damage graph in the previous segment, so I'm not gonna yammer on too long about this. But they're quite reliable as far as damage goes because it's just death by 1,000 cuts. On average, as I said, they will take out any small foot heroes. They're actually also pretty easy to get in range, both for their ranged attacks and their combat attacks. But the setup is very important, and I've also graphed that out with some moving circles and all that in the strategy segment, which we will get to after the screening here. And then you've got their last role, and that's screening. And I think most of you will not enjoy this role if you've played with them because you might end up losing them. But that's the role of the screen. They are super fragile. Keep that in mind. They're one health each, so 10 health total, as I said, and only on a 5-up save. But you can use them as a screen and then use your driving current ability in their combat phase to jump over the hard-hitting units or away from the hard-hitting units to somewhere else. So unless your opponent actually has damage in their charge phase, you could actually still use your own fight abilities, abilities in the fight phase before they use a fight ability on you to actually deal damage. So that is an interaction that's something that you can play with. But once again, I'm showing this off in the strategy section in just a sec. Be very, very mindful of your positioning with this unit in all cases, but especially with the screening, and plan ahead. I just want to clarify here, if you're only starting off with this unit now and you're getting to grips with how they work, I would not use them in this way because it's actually quite risky. Use them for the battle attacks and the damage first so you get the hang of them, and then if you feel confident you can start using them as screens as well. But also, of course, if you're going to win the game by sacrificing them, please do. Okay, on to strategies then. I'm going to cover 2 topics here for you guys. First of all, we're going to look at what synergies they have. Spoilers, there are none. Then we're going to look at how to position them on the battlefield for battle tactics, screening, and how to get the most out of their shooting with good positioning. So let's start off with synergy here. As I mentioned, there's actually no benefit for them in our index at all. There's no interaction with the battle formations, there's no interaction with the facets of war, and there's no keyword interactions, as I said in the at the beginning of our presentation here. That's actually quite beneficial in my eyes, because that means that all of their value is on their Warscroll. Whereas with Venari or Huracan or LRL units, you need that facet of war to get the most out of those units. But with the Ydrilan, for now, we get all of their flexible nature for free, which is very, very cool. And I just love that they kind of play like our old Lumineth units would have played, like Venari with Shining Company already built in, or Power of Vision already built in. I do really feel that we're missing out a little bit in that regard. And they're also a lone agent. That means they need no backup or no support, so you could just pick one unit of them in your lists, and you don't have to think about anything else that you need to buff them up or anything, because they'll do what you want them to do completely by themselves, which is amazing. All right, on to positioning things. So, I mean, you guys, if you followed this channel, and you've seen the Lumineth content from 3rd edition, you might have missed this kind of content, because it's been a while since I've made a unit guide like this, because it takes such a long time. But now with me being able to screenshot Warscrolls, it actually speeds the process up quite a little bit. But in these PowerPoint slides goes a lot of time, because I have to drop all of those circles separately. So we've got a positioning graph here to show off how you can use them to complete battle tactics, and especially the flanks, take their flanks and take their lands. So on the left here, you've got our Riverblades, and on the right, you've got a cavalry unit. In my example, it's going to be a wind charges unit. But you could also use any cavalry unit or any small unit, of course, or a fox if you wanted to. I deploy one fast unit on one flank and one Riverblade unit on the other flank in most cases. I deploy the Riverblade unit a little bit further up, and I try to measure 8 inches, that's 7 plus their minimum run move, from being able to complete take their flank. So that would mean you would need to be just a millimeter inside your opponent's territory at least, and you need to be able to have your entire Riverblades unit wholly within the short table edge. Obviously, you need to do the same with the other units. So, for example, the wind chargers here, you have to keep that in mind as well. But they're a little bit more forgiving. You can hide them further in the back, especially if you have the Huracan Temple Facet of War on. You can actually do 28 inches with them, whereas with the Riverblades, you're stuck with 8. Or if you auto-run them, a respectable 13. If you're scared of them getting deleted by your opponent before you can use them for take the flanks, you can obviously, as I just said, move them back 13 inches and then auto-run them with your command point to get them into range for the take their flanks. So we're moving this unit up now, and the Riverblades move to our flanks, and they move 6, 8, 7, 8, or whatever inches that you need them to complete the take the flanks tactic. And our Wind Chargers unit is also gonna move up. Okay, we've got teleport to the we've got take the flanks covered, and that's our battle tactic for round 1. Round 2, we're gonna want to take these units away. The Wind Chargers can just dart over to the middle of the field, and the Riverblades can teleport away. Now, if we want the Riverblades to remain on that flank, that's fine. That's cool. We can move them slightly to the middle with a normal move if we wanted to, but we could teleport them to a different flank as well. Also works. In this case, I've got a couple of arrows. So for example, you could teleport the Riverblades back to your backfield where they're safe to complete different battle tactics further on. You could throw them all the way towards the back of your opponent's battlefield. They might have already left their backfield open a little bit. You could actually take their lands there, or maybe even touch an objective if you're lucky. So all of those options actually work. Keep in mind that teleporting wholly within 6 inches of a table edge doesn't actually have to be the small edges only. So you could also teleport to almost anywhere on the battlefield with these guys, especially with their insane movement afterwards. I really love this unit with at least 1 or 2 Huracan units in tandem. They really do wonders for all battle tactics. So that's one thing you can do. Let's move on to our screening example here. For screening, I've got our Riverblades once again. They're the brown dots. And then I've got the enemy's army here, or a small regiment of its army. We've got 5 cavalry models staring us down, and then 10 squishy-ish, models behind those, and then maybe a terrain piece or a small hero, whatever, on the side to the right of our Riverblades there. Okay, so the enemy charges into our Riverblades. There's nothing we can do about that. That's fine. We wanted them to do that because it's our screen for a reason. The enemy makes contact. And then it's up to our Riverblades to do their magic. And by magic, I don't actually mean casting, but do their thing, you know. And we're going to roll 2d6 inches with our driving current thing, our fight ability move. And we're going to try to hop over this enemy unit that just charges or move off to a different place outside of their combat range. For example, you could move on to that small hero or a terrain piece or whatever it is, maybe an endless spell, or onto that smaller unit in the back there. Now, the chances of you succeeding in this are quite, realistic. But the chance of you completely avoiding combat with a cavalry unit are not as realistic, because a lot of cavalry units or infantry units are going to be reinforced these days. And keep in mind, your average roll is a 7, so those enemy units that charge you are going to get a 3-inch pile-in move, and then also get a 3-inch combat range. So you will probably still get hit if you do an average roll, because your unit's gonna be bigger than one model, so it's hard to be outside of combat completely. But it would actually work wonders against small heroes that charge into them. Please keep in mind that the flexibility of charging opponents' endless spells and terrain is really nice for these Riverblade guys. So yeah, that's something that you could do, but again, as I said in our previous segment, it's pretty risky. The last thing I wanted to show off here was how to position them to get the most out of their shooting attacks. And I've got 2 setups here that can help you do just that. So the difficulty with the Riverblades is their darts only have a 10-inch range. And if you want to shoot after teleporting away and you want to get close to a unit, you can only get as close as just outside of 9 inches. So there is a specific deployment that you have to do, or a setup, I should say, after teleports, to get into range with all 10 of them. And you can only do that because it's a Warcry Warband, guys, because thanks to the Warcry Warband, we can actually use 5 smaller models on smaller bases to go in front of our bigger models, and thus still reach the other side of the, to get all of our 10 models shooting within 10 inches. Let me show you how. So in our first example here, we're placing our Riverblades, our smaller units up front. So the front is the downside of the slide here. So the smaller bases are in front of the other bigger models, and you have to kind of place them diagonally from each other, like I showing here on the slide. And by leaving a little space open, you can just get over that 1-inch range from that 28.5 mil base that the other smaller Riverblades are on. And that means that your 32 mil bases can actually also reach with 10 inches. While if you would swap the setup and you would put the 32 mil bases in front, you could actually not reach with a 28.5 mil bases. So thank you, Warcry, for giving us a unit that can actually still reach everything because there's 5 models with a smaller base size there, so that would just work. The magic here is that you need 3 millimeter extra in some way. A different thing that you could do is the deployment or the setup, on the right. I don't like this one at all because once you lose 1 model, you're losing 7 because you're gonna break your coherency. But if you really need it, you guys, and you really need to get into range, you could also do this. So remember, a unit with 7 or more models has to be within half an inch of at least 2 other models. With the setup on the right, that would still be the case, but once they take a casualty, your line would crumple till you reach the other triangle setup on the other corner of your unit. So you lose 7 models in one go. So only go for this setup if you don't care about them living, or if you really need all that ranged output in one go. If your opponent obviously has no way to interact with your Riverblades, they have no way to regen with a shooting attack, you could just go balls to the wall and deploy them like this, or set them up like this, and then charge them in or reorganize them maybe. Okay. Then we're gonna have to look at some tips and tricks. So this segment I kind of used to stick all the extra info in that I couldn't organize well, or that it wasn't big enough to make an entire slide for. So we're gonna look at 3 things. How you can still buff them a little bit, how many of these units you should actually bring, and how you have to play with them bravely, or when it's kind of foolish how you're playing with them. Let's look at some buffs first. I think for this unit, less is more. Don't invest too many resources into this unit. It has all of its value on its Warscroll already. It doesn't really need a lot of buffs anyway, but if you wanted to buff them, I think these 3 that I put here on the slide are the most interesting for the Riverblades. Speed of Fish to add +4 move is actually and obviously pretty nice. That would put them on an 11-inch move, which is interesting, but keep in mind you can't move after your teleport, so that's something to consider before Speed of Fishing them. Masterful Tactician is a heroic trait that would allow units wholly within 12 inches of that hero to redeploy at least 4 inches. If you roll lower than a 4, it counts as a 4. That's interesting for them because they are so fragile, you want to keep them out of combat, but you could also use that redeploy to get closer to your enemy, not only for a counter charge, but also to use the driving current ability to get into melee during the fight phase itself. So keep in mind that redeploy doesn't always have to be used to flee. You could actually also use it to advance, and on this unit that can be really powerful. I also feel like Rune of Petrification is interesting as a protection mechanic. If you manage to proc some Strike Last on enemy units, and they charge into your Riverblades, the Riverblades at least have a chance to deal some damage back. Now that obviously goes for all of our units, and to be honest, the execution of this is going to be difficult because your rune only procs in hero phase, you have to get it off on the right units. They can still move around that, so I'm not too big on that specific buff, but I did feel like it was interesting to include here. All in all, I would really stick with the first sentence, less is more. Now, how many of these units would you bring? Because I'm obviously super excited about this unit. It does a lot of work for me, but I do feel like bringing more than 2 is a little bit weird because it's just gonna melt. And obviously it depends on what you already have in your army. Why do I want to bring at least one of these units every time? I like fast units. I like the flexibility of them. And I do think you need at least 2 fast/throwaway-esque units to complete battle tactics. If you already have a huge regiment or segment of Huracan units, I don't actually think you're going to be loving the Ydrilan Riverblades as much as I am, because you just don't need that speed necessarily. Why would it be interesting though? You could actually just drop one of your Huracan wind charge units, a unit of 5. You could easily swap in or drop out and swap in a Ydrilan Riverblades unit. You get almost the same value out of that in the long run, and you save yourself some points. So that's interesting. Also keep in mind how sturdy your army is. If your army is already quite fragile, I mean even more fragile than the generic Lumineth army would be, adding a lot of Riverblades on top of that is probably not the best way. But I see a lot of people taking at least 1 and 2 is also fine. I think 3 is overdoing it a little bit. So probably stick to 1 or 2. I did also mention that I was going to talk about the financial aspect here. They're now separately available. In my region, it's a little bit more than 50 euros for those 10 models, which is, still quite expensive. And keep in mind that Warcry warbands have a limited shelf life, so they're gonna get squashed at some point. What I expect is that the 32 mil units are gonna remain in the game as our Ydrilan specialized units when the Ydrilan Temple is released, and the smaller units will just go away. Now you could obviously rebase them to 32 mils, and I don't think anyone would be bothered if you played them as, you know, two separate Riverblade units. But it's just something that I want you guys to keep in mind before you go off spending more than 100 euros on two of these units, that they might actually have a, you know, a limited shelf life. And then something that goes for a lot of units, but I feel this is the most important for fragile units like this, that really rely on their movement to survive. Don't go too YOLO too soon. My opponent and I, we get red haze from time to time, where we just want to be charging all the time, but that's the Ogre way. That's not the Lumineth way. So keep in mind, just don't be too greedy. Play them safe at the start. Or if you want to sacrifice them, make sure it's for a capitalizing play later on or in that turn itself. But also don't be too cagey. I understand you've just painted up this beautiful unit. It looks amazing. You've gone out of your way and bought that units separately, but it's also only 140 points. It's just the same as 10 Wardens would be. And I think you wouldn't be too bothered about throwing away 10 Wardens to complete a battle tactic or to, you know, make the best out of your turn. So don't be bothered too much about the Riverblades either. So don't YOLO, but don't be too cagey either. Be a little bit brave and be a little bit foolish, but not too much of both. Right, and that brings us to the end of our video, guys. This is the first unit guide that I've done for AOS 4. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've been a long-term fan, by now we can actually say it's long-term. Let us know what you thought about this. Do you still like the format? Is there something that you wanted me to add to this? Is there something that you felt like you missed in this video compared to maybe the 3rd edition, or that you wanted to include because there's new stuff for 4th edition? Please, I want to know. I also want to hear all of your cool Riverblade stories. It could be about painting, about how you acquired them. It could be about how you use them in game. Drop it in the comments. And if you like this video, leave a like. And please do share it around and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay in touch for more Lumineth guides. Or if you want to stay in touch for a couple of other armies, because Ryan's got a pretty cool plan up its sleeve. I don't know whether by the time this video is released, he'll have spoiled it already. But he's got a pretty cool plan for another index review that you guys will probably like if you enjoy Magic. That's a little bit of a spoiler there for you guys as well. So I'll meet you guys in the comments or in Discord, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.